Hi, I'm Jennifer and this is Kate, and welcome to what we've been reading for March 2023.
Which is basically the same thing as what we've been reading for Lent 2023.
Not necessarily. We do have a few other books that are not Lent related, so that's good.
A couple, but the majority of it has been Lent books.
Well, it is Lent.
Yes.
So.
But anyway, let's go ahead and get started and see what we've been reading.
Okay, so we're going to start with this book. The book we didn't know we needed for Lent is called Pocket Guide to the Stations of the Cross by Dr. Edward Sri, and it is fantastic.
So back in February, he came to our church and led a day of reflection before Lent. And by the way, if you have never heard him speak, you need to. He is fantastic.
Definitely go see him in person. He is so good. And that's how we found out about this book, which we almost didn't buy because, let's face it, we already have a lot of books here about the Stations of the Cross. But then during his talk, Dr. Sri said two things that changed our minds.
And the first one is that he praised the Stations of the Cross very frequently and in all kinds of different places, like walking between flights at the airport or while just driving in his car.
And I thought, what? Who has all the Stations of the Cross memorized? Well, apparently Dr. Sri does. So that made a really big impression on me. I already knew that there were people out there who prayed the Stations of the Cross every single day and not just during Lent. Like John Paul II, he prayed the Stations every single day. And yet I was not one of those people. I'm not one of those people. But it got me to thinking, you know what? Maybe I should be.
And he also mentions in this book that there are two different Stations of the Cross. There are the traditional stations, which are the ones that we're well familiar with, but there are also the scriptural Stations of the Cross, which were founded by John Paul II.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, what? There are two different types of Stations of the Cross? That is news to me. I had no idea. I didn't even know what the difference was between them.
So the traditional Stations of the Cross go back to the 13th century when Franciscan friars in the Holy Land put up the 14 stations along the Way of the Cross in Jerusalem.
But it turns out that of those 14 stations, only 8 of those come right from the Gospels, and then the other 6, like Veronica wiping Jesus' face with her veil and Jesus falling 3 times, those come from church tradition.
So in 1991, John Paul II established the 14 scriptural stations, all of which come directly from the Gospel. And there is overlap between the scriptural and traditional stations. There's 8 stations they share. But for the scriptural stations, the other 6 are different events from the Gospel, like Peter denying Jesus and Jesus promising his kingdom to the good thief.
This opens up a whole new way to meditate on the Passion of Christ, and both sets of stations are in this book, along with all of Dr. Sri's wonderful reflections, which are just spot on for today's world.
Mm-hmm. And the book is also just a really nice book. It's got beautiful black and white illustrations for each station, and it's that nice size. It's the faux leather cover.
Oh, it just feels so nice to hold. I know that is superficial, but anyway, it was one of our favorite books from this Lent, and again, a surprise find. We almost didn't even buy it.
So now let's take a look at the other books that we've been reading this Lent, and there are quite a few of them.
There were a lot of them, so we're just going to hit the highlights for you, starting with one that was another favorite, and it's this one, Awakening by Claudia McAdam. It's a time travel book that takes you back to the days right before Good Friday.
So it follows Ronnie, a young teenager who mysteriously wakes up in Jerusalem during Holy Week. And it's very interesting because she knows what's going to happen, but nobody else does.
So this one is very cleverly written. The author takes all the people and events from Holy Week and kind of weaves them together in a very unique way. But we're not going to give any spoilers for this one because it's definitely more fun to kind of figure it all out as you go along reading.
Yeah, there's a lot of like, oh, that's what that is, or oh, that's who that person is. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's a lot of fun to read, but it's also very thought-provoking, and it's definitely one of those books that once you pick it up, you don't want to put it down. You just want to see what happens next.
Definitely, it's a page turner. There was only one thing that I didn't like about this book, and that is that everything that Jesus says comes straight from the Gospels. The author has created no new dialogue for Jesus. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it did seem kind of weird and awkward in places. So that was just my opinion.
But it still managed to top our favorites list along with this book, Ashes, Visible and Invisible from the Catholic Teen Book Authors. Either one of these would be great young adult reads.
But I'm an old folk and I still enjoyed them both. If you are a Catholic teen books fan, then this is a great one. It has 10 different stories, and it's always fun to see what the authors have come up with, how they've taken their characters and reinvented them in these short stories.
So next up, we have this book, What Jesus Saw from the Cross.
No.
It's a no.
Yeah, we had mixed feelings about this one, definitely.
Yeah, a tiny percentage of this book is interesting, and the rest of it is just rambly.
I wouldn't say that. Some of it is good, but I think the downfall of this book is the author's writing style. It's definitely old-fashioned, flowery. It feels really heavy. It's not easy for the modern reader to warm up to this one, and yet it does have some good parts in it, some interesting things. For instance, the author mentions that, when Jesus was carrying his cross on the way to Calvary, that was during the yearly celebration of Passover in Jerusalem.
So the little narrow streets that he would be walking would be full of people and animals, and there'd be sheep and donkeys jostling him and running into him.
Right, so that is very different from how we see this portrayed in the movies. When Jesus is carrying his cross and the streets are wide open and, there are spectators just lining the sides, like, it's a parade or something.
Yeah.
That's probably not how it was.
So that was really interesting, but for the most part, it was not a favorite.
Yeah, not a favorite. The crucifixion details that he talks about, those are interesting, very scary, very sad. But yeah, again, this one didn't pan out quite the way we had hoped.
Yeah, mixed feelings on this book.
Okay, next up we have this one, Portrait of Jesus, and it takes you all the way from his birth to his resurrection via sacred artwork and reflections and poems from different famous authors.
So a lot of the reflections in this book were really good, though some of them were a little unexpected and strange.
Yeah, there was one, the painting was Jesus leaving his home to start his public ministry, and the reflection was about the angry young Jesus who can't wait to leave the dust of this backwater Nazareth town behind him. And I don't know, that just didn't seem quite right somehow.
But we really did enjoy looking at the paintings in this book. A lot of the older paintings, they're just kind of hilarious to look at. Like this one where Peter is cutting off the ear of Malchus without even looking.
It's amazing how he can do that. Also in this one, the Roman soldier, looks like he is a knight of the round table, whereas everyone else is just in regular first century garb. So that's interesting.
And there was also another favorite in this one called Christ Appearing to the Virgin, which we really liked seeing. There is an old church tradition that the first person that Jesus appeared to after he rose from the dead was in fact his mother, even before Mary Magdalene.
And I hope so, because after all that she suffered that day, I hope he stopped by and said, "Hey mom, hello, I'm still alive." I hope that really is true, that he saw her first.
So now we have two books which we haven't quite finished yet. And the first one is The Little Way of Lent, and the second one is Treasury of Easter Celebrations.
So The Little Way of Lent has turned out to be really good, just as good as the reviewers all said. It is based on the daily readings from the Bible for Lent, and then on Sunday it has an A, B, and C reading depending on which cycle of the church year we're in. This year we're reading cycle A. So that's in there. It has a lot of good motivation in it to help you keep praying and fasting and giving alms during Lent. And it also has a quote every day from St. Therese. So this has just been really good. I could definitely see us, or at least me, rereading it again next year.
And then this one we'll have to get back to you on. We read this section for Mardi Gras and Ash Wednesday back in February, and then tomorrow we'll start in with a section on Holy Week, and then it also has an entire another section for the Easter season. So we'll see how this one goes. We'll keep you updated.
And finally, we have two books that we read during March that are completely not Lent related. Hooray!
Yeah. During our recent trip to the Indiana Catholic Women's Conference, we listened to the Trials of St. Patrick, which that was right before St. Patrick's Day, so perfect timing.
Yeah, and it's an audio drama, so it's really neat. The actors bring St. Patrick to life, and then you also have music and sounds, like the crowd and the weather, and it just brings it all to life. Although it's been a few years since I had listened to that one, I had forgotten that it is kind of scary in parts.
Yeah, like when St. Patrick battles the Druid god, that was very scary. That was very intense.
Yeah, a little creepy.
Yeah,
But good.
Yeah, but really good. We definitely really loved this one. It would be great for your older kids.
And then last but definitely not least, we have Understanding St. Paul by Deacon Bob Evans. This was our Catholic read-along book for the month of March from Sophia Institute Press, and I have to say it was really, really good.
So St. Paul always makes us a little bit nervous because he can be hard to understand, but the author walks you through his writings and his world in such a fascinating way.
Yeah, the author explains that maintaining order was a huge deal back in Paul's time. Everybody wanted to be orderly in the way that God's creation has perfect order. So that really influenced how people wrote and the things that they said and the things that were important to them. The author also mentions the fact that Paul's letters, he wrote as letters, just, letters to individual people, and he probably had no idea that we would still be reading them 2,000 years later.
So knowing that type of information can help you better understand how Paul wrote and what he's actually saying. It's a very well-researched book, and we really did enjoy it. And if you want to get to know St. Paul better, then definitely check this one out.
It's very user-friendly.
All right, so we have done a lot of reading this Lent.
We definitely have. We've had some cold days. It's been good reading weather, stay inside and bundle up with St. Paul.
Yeah. So let us know down in the comments what you've been reading for Lent and how that's going for you.
And as always, we thank you so much for watching. Have a blessed Holy Week, and we'll see you next time. Bye.